My father kicked down my bedroom door at 2 in the morning, screaming about loyalty while demanding my emergency savings. He thought he was asserting his dominance over his house, but he didn't realize the wood splintering under his boot was the only thing holding our family's lies together. By dawn, he wouldn't just lose his temper, he would lose the deed to the home he claimed to own, all because of a $600,000 secret I wasn't supposed to find. The basement apartment always smelled like wet concrete and unfulfilled promises. I told myself it was temporary. That was the word I used to armor myself against the humiliation of being 33 years old and living below my parents' kitchen. It was temporary while I looked for a new marketing director role. It was temporary so I could save first and last month's rent for a place in the city. It was temporary because paying the utilities and the property taxes for my father felt like a fair trade for a roof, even if that roof was the floorboards he paced on when he couldn't sleep. I was lying in bed, staring at the exposed ductwork in the ceiling, when the shouting started upstairs. It was 2 in the morning. I had learned to categorize the sounds of my parents' marriage over 3 decades. There was the low, simmering hum of passive aggression, usually over dinner. There was the sharp, staccato bickering about schedules and groceries. Then there was this. This was the heavy, thudding sound of my father, Raymond Martinez, moving furniture with his rage. I pulled the duvet up to my chin, a childish reflex I hadn't grown out of. I heard my mother, Denise, her voice high and thin, pleading with him to lower his voice. He did not lower his voice. "You think she has it?" Raymond roared. The sound vibrated through the floorboards. "I know she has it. She's been hoarding it. Little Miss Perfect with her savings account while we drown up here." My stomach turned over. I knew exactly what they were talking about. My severance package. The modest emergency fund I had scraped together after the layoffs hit my firm 3 months ago. It was the only thing standing between me and total dependency. And in this house, independence was treated like a personal insult. I heard the heavy stomp of his boots hitting the stairs. I sat up, my heart hammering against my ribs. I scrambled out of bed and rushed to the door, checking the lock. It was a flimsy interior lock, the kind meant for privacy, not security. I backed away, clutching my phone. "Lily, open this door." His voice wasn't just angry, it was wet with something else. Desperation. Panic. "Dad, go to bed," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We can talk in the morning." "I don't want to talk. Open the damn door." I didn't move. I stood in the center of the room, shivering in my oversized t-shirt. I could hear my mother on the stairs behind him, her voice a terrified whisper. "Ray, please, stop it. You're going to wake the neighbors. Let them wake up," he shouted. "Let everyone know I'm raising an ungrateful leech." The first kick hit the door like a thunderclap. I flinched, dropping my phone on the rug. The wood around the frame groaned. "Dad, stop!" I screamed. He didn't stop. He kicked it again. I saw the jamb splinter. A long crack appeared near the deadbolt. Dust and paint chips rained down onto the linoleum. This wasn't a tantrum. This was an invasion. With a final, sickening crunch, the wood gave way. The door swung inward, banging hard against the wall. Raymond Martinez stood in the doorway, his chest heaving. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and heavy-set, with a face that usually carried a mask of jovial neighborhood charm. Now, that face was flushed a deep, alarming crimson. His eyes were wide and unfocused. He looked like a stranger wearing my father's skin. "Where is it?" he demanded. He stepped into the room. The space suddenly felt microscopic. "Where is what?" I asked, backing up until my legs hit the edge of my mattress. "The cash. Lily. The stash. I know you have it. You think I'm stupid? You think I don't know you're sitting on pile of cash while I'm trying to keep this roof over your head? I'm paying the taxes." "Dad," I said, my voice trembling. "I paid the electric bill yesterday. That's pennies." He took another step. I could smell the stale scent of scotch on him, mixed with the metallic tang of adrenaline. "I need the emergency fund. Write me a check. Now. Like a daughter should. It wasn't a request. It was a robbery." "Dad, that money is for my rent when I move out," I said, trying to summon the authority I used to have in boardrooms. I can't give it to you. You live under my floor, he bellowed, spit flying from his lips. You eat my food. You use my water. And you tell me no? He lunged forward, grabbing my purse from the hook on the wall. He upended it onto the floor, my wallet, keys, and lipstick scattered across the rug. He kicked at them, looking for cash. Stop it! You're crazy! I yelled. My mother appeared in the doorway. She looked small, wrapped in her floral bathrobe, her face pale and devoid of makeup. She didn't look at me. She looked only at him. Ray, honey, that's enough, she said softly. Her tone wasn't one of outrage. It was the tone one uses to soothe a frightened animal. Come upstairs. You're stressed. It's the blood pressure. He spun around to face her, pointing a shaking finger at me. She's hiding it. Denise, she's hiding money from us. I know. Ray. I know, Mom said, stepping over the splintered wood of my doorframe. She reached out and touched his arm. We'll figure it out. Just come upstairs. You need to rest. She looked at me then. Her eyes were hard, flat surfaces. There was no apology in them, only a warning. Don't make this worse. I watched as she slipped her hand into her pocket and pulled out a small orange pill bottle. She shook 2 tablets into her hand and pressed them into his palm. It was a practiced motion, smooth and secretive, like a magic trick. Take these, she whispered. It helps the noise in your head. Raymond stared at the pills, his breathing ragged. The fight seemed to drain out of him all at once, leaving him sagging and old. He swallowed them dry without looking at me again. Fix the door. He grunted to the air. Then he turned and walked back up the stairs, heavy and slow. My mother lingered for a second. She looked at the ruined doorframe, then at my trembling hands. He's just under a lot of pressure. Lily, she said, don't take it personally. She turned and followed him, closing the door at the top of the stairs. I stood in the silence of the basement, staring at the jagged wood sticking out of the frame. I felt cold all over, a deep, bone-chilling freeze that had nothing to do with the temperature. This wasn't just pressure, this was violence, and my mother hadn't stopped it. She had managed it. I grabbed my keys and my wallet from the floor. I didn't pack a bag. I just needed to be anywhere that wasn't here. The fluorescent lights of the gas station hummed with a headache-inducing frequency. I was parked near the air pump. The doors locked, the engine idling just to keep the heat running. It was 3 a.m. now. My hands were shaking so badly I had to rest the phone on the steering wheel to dial. Tessa picked up on the second ring. Profound silence? No, she said, her voice raspy with sleep but instantly alert. Are you okay? Where are you? I'm at the Shell station on 4th. I said. I couldn't keep the tremor out of my voice. He kicked the door down. Tess. He kicked my door down. Silence on the other end. Then the rustle of sheets. Did he hit you? She asked. No, he wanted money. He went through my purse. Mom gave him pills and took him upstairs. Okay, Tessa said. Her voice shifted. It became the voice she used when she was managing a crisis at the hospital where she worked as a triage nurse. Listen to me, Lily. Do not go back there tonight. I know, I said, wiping a tear from my cheek. I don't know where to go. Come here, obviously, she said, but listen to me. Before you come here, I want you to write down exactly what happened. Everything he said, every word. Why? I asked. Because by tomorrow morning, they are going to try to rewrite history. Tessa said, I've seen this before. Families implode over money. Lily, and the first casualty is always the truth. Document everything. Take pictures of the door when you go back. Go back? I asked, horrified. You have to go back to get your things, Tessa said, but not alone. I'm coming with you in the morning. I can't ask you to do that. You aren't asking. I'm telling. Stay at the gas station. I'm putting on coffee. I'll be there in 10 minutes to lead you to my place. I hung up the phone and looked out at the empty pumps. A moth was battering itself against the overhead light, throwing erratic shadows on the pavement. I felt like that moth. I had spent my whole life trying to get close to the light of my parents' approval, trying to be the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who fixed things. and all it had gotten me was burned. The morning sun made everything look deceptively normal. The suburban street was quiet. Sprinklers hissed on perfectly manicured lawns. A neighbor was walking a golden retriever. When I pulled into the driveway with Tessa's car right behind me, I felt a wave of nausea. The house looked the same as it had yesterday. Stately, beige, respectable. It was a lie built of brick and siding. Tessa got out of her car, wearing her scrubs and a pair of oversized sunglasses. She didn't hug me. She just nodded at the front door. "Let's get your essentials," she said. "Laptop, documents, clothes, fast." We walked in through the front door. The house was silent. The kitchen was spotless. My father was sitting at the breakfast table, reading the newspaper. A mug of coffee sat steaming near his right hand. He looked up as we entered. He looked freshly showered, his hair combed back, his face smooth and calm. "Morning," he said. He didn't look at Tessa. He looked at me, offering a tight, confusing smile. "You're up early?" I stared at him. The disconnect between this man and the monster who had smashed my door 6 hours ago was so jarring I felt dizzy. "Dad," I said, "about last night." He waved a hand dismissively, turning a page of the paper. I barely remember it. "Lily," he said casually, "I think I had a bad reaction to that cough medicine. Your mother says I was sleepwalking or something." "Sleepwalking?" I repeated. "You kicked my door down. You demanded $6,000. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "You're overreacting." "Honey, you always do. You have such a dramatic imagination. I probably just bumped into it. That frame was old anyway. I'll put some wood glue on it later." I felt Tessa stiffen beside me. "Mr. Martinez," Tessa said, her voice cool and professional. "The door frame is shattered. That wasn't a bump." He finally looked at her. His eyes were cold chips of flint. "This is a family matter." "Tessa, I don't recall inviting you to breakfast." I turned away from him, my hands balling into fists. I couldn't do this. I couldn't play this game where reality was optional. "I'm going downstairs to pack a bag," I said. I marched past him. On the kitchen counter, next to the fruit bowl, was a stack of mail. It must have arrived yesterday and been ignored in the chaos. My eye caught the edge of a thick envelope. It wasn't in a standard business envelope. It was a certified mailer, the kind with the green tracking sticker. The return address was a generic P.O. box, but the bold red text stamped on the front was impossible to miss. Notice of default and intent to accelerate. I froze. My hand hovered over it. "Lily, don't be rude to your father." My mother's voice came from the hallway. She was carrying a basket of laundry, looking tired but composed. I ignored her. I grabbed the envelope. It had been ripped open already. I pulled out the letter inside. The header was from a company called Obsidian Asset Management. I had never heard of them. I scanned the dense legal text, my brain catching on terrifying keywords: delinquent, breach of contract, immediate demand, and then the number. It was bolded in the middle of the paragraph. Total amount due to cure, $58,000. Total principal balance accelerated, $592,000. $600,000. The air left my lungs. "What is this?" I whispered. Denise dropped the laundry basket. She crossed the kitchen with shocking speed and snatched the letter out of my hand. "It's junk mail," she snapped. She crumpled it in her fist, holding it tight against her chest. "It's a scam. You know how they send these things, trying to scare seniors." "Mom," I said, my voice rising. "That wasn't junk mail. That was a foreclosure notice. It had the legal description of the house on it. Lot 42, Block 7. I saw it. It's nothing," she insisted, her eyes darting to Raymond. Raymond hadn't moved. He was staring at his coffee cup, his knuckles white as he gripped the handle. "Dad?" I said. "Get out," he said. His voice was low, but it carried that same tremor of fear I had heard last night. "What?" I asked. "I said get out," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. The coffee mug jumped, spilling brown liquid across the newspaper. "You come in here, dragging strangers into our business, snooping through my mail? I want you out. You can't just kick me out." I said, "I pay rent." "You're a guest," he roared, "and you're no longer welcome. You have 72 hours. Get your trash out of my basement." He wasn't looking at me with anger anymore. He was looking at me with terror. He looked like a man who was trying to push me out of a burning building before I noticed the flames. I looked at Denise. She was staring at the floor, clutching the crumpled letter like it was a holy relic. "Come on, Lily," Tessa said, grabbing my arm. "Let's go. Now." I let her pull me toward the basement door. We went down, packed 2 suitcases in 10 minutes, and hauled them out to her car. I didn't say another word to my parents. I didn't look back at the kitchen. We sat in Tessa's living room an hour later. My suitcases were by the door. I was sitting on her couch with my laptop open, my hands still trembling. "I need to know." I said, "Lily, leave it alone," Tessa said gently. "You're out. That's what matters." "No," I said, "if they lose the house, Mom has nowhere to go." And he said it was junk mail. If it's a mistake, I need to help them fix it. I navigated to the county property portal. It was a clunky government website, slow to load. I typed in my parents' address. The search wheel spun for an agonizing 10 seconds, then the results populated. Owner, Raymond and Denise Martinez. Year built, 1990. I scrolled down to the section labeled Encumbrances and Liens. There it was, recorded 6 months ago. A deed of trust. Grantor, Raymond Martinez. Grantee, Obsidian Asset Management, LLC. Amount, $600,000. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a scam. It was real. But that wasn't the part that made my blood run cold. I clicked on the document image to view the PDF. It downloaded slowly. I opened it and zoomed in on the signature page. There was my father's signature, big and sprawling. There was my mother's signature, small and tight, and below them, there was a third line. Guarantor. And there, signed in blue ink, was a name that made the room spin. Lily Martinez. I stared at the screen. The signature looked like mine. It had the loop on the L, the sharp cross on the T, but I had never signed this. I had never heard of Obsidian Asset Management. 6 months ago, I was working 60 hours a week launching a new product line. I hadn't been to a bank with my parents in a decade. "Lily?" Tessa asked, leaning over my shoulder. "What is it?" I pointed at the screen. My finger left a smudge on the glass. He didn't just kick me out because he was angry. I whispered. The horror washed over me, cold and absolute. He kicked me out because he knew I was about to find this. Find what? He borrowed $600,000 against the house, I said, my voice sounding hollow. And he used my name to do it. Tessa stared at the screen. Oh my God. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text from my mother. Please don't be mad at your father. He loves you. We just need some space. We can talk next week. I looked at the text, then back at the forged signature on the screen. I felt a shift inside me. It was a subtle, mechanical click, like a gear slipping into a new groove. The sadness I had felt all morning, the hurt of the rejection, the fear of homelessness, evaporated. What replaced it was something colder, something harder. They thought I was the responsible one, the one who would fix things, the one who would take the pills and the lies and smooth them over to keep the peace. They were wrong. I opened a new folder on my desktop. I named it Evidence. What are you doing? Tessa asked. I took a screenshot of the lien. I dragged it into the folder. Then I pulled out my phone and uploaded the photo I had snapped of the splintered doorframe before we left. I'm not getting revenge, I said, typing a new note titled, Timeline of Events. I looked at Tessa. Her eyes were wide. I'm getting clarity, I said. Because whatever this is, whatever they've done, feelings aren't going to fix it. The paperwork is the only thing that matters now. I saved the file, and then I started to dig. The waiting room of the legal aid clinic smelled of stale coffee and industrial carpet cleaner, a scent that somehow amplified the knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. I sat on a plastic chair, clutching a manila folder that contained the few scraps of evidence I had managed to print out at the library. Marianne Cho did not look like the kind of lawyer you saw on billboards. Her office was a converted supply closet in the back of a community center, stacked floor to ceiling with files. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a haircut that suggested she didn't have time for vanity. She didn't offer me tea. She didn't offer me sympathy. She offered me a seat and held out her hand for the papers. I watched her read. Her eyes scanned the foreclosure notice, the property tax records, and the timeline I had typed up. She didn't blink. She didn't gasp. She just hummed, a low, vibrating sound in her throat that could have meant anything. "This notice is real," she said, tossing the paper onto her desk. "Obsidian Asset Management. I know them. They are what we call a distress lender. They buy bad debt, or they originate high-interest loans to people who can't get money anywhere else. My father said it was junk mail." I said, Marianne looked at me over the top of her reading glasses. "Your father is lying, Lily, or he is in denial deep enough to drown in. This is an intent to accelerate. It means the lender is done asking nicely. They want the full balance." She tapped the figure on the page. $600,000, she read. "That is a lot of money for a refinance on a house that, by my quick estimate of this neighborhood, is worth maybe $750,000 on a good day." "There is almost no equity left. How is that possible?" I asked. "They paid off the mortgage years ago. They had a mortgage-burning party. I was there." Marianne leaned back, interlacing her fingers. "Private notes hide behind many things. Lily, sometimes they look like friendly refinancing. A friend of a friend offers a bridge loan to help with a business cash flow problem. The terms seem easy. No credit check, just the house as collateral. But the interest compounds, the penalties stack, and often, family members get pulled in as guarantors without understanding what they are signing." She looked at me pointedly. "You said your name is on the deed of trust?" "I saw it on the county portal." I said, "But I never signed a loan for $600,000. Marianne pulled a notepad toward her. "We need to pull your credit report, right now." She spun her monitor around and walked me through the process. My hands shook as I typed in my social security number. We waited for the report to generate. When it did, Marianne scrolled past the student loans I had paid off and the credit card I paid in full every month. "There," she said, pointing to the bottom of the screen. Under the section labeled Inquiries, there was a soft pull from 6 months ago. The entity wasn't Obsidian. It was listed as HRCC Holdings. "And look at this," she added, scrolling up. Under Closed Accounts, there was a trade line I didn't recognize. It was listed as a promissory note. Opened 4 years ago. Closed and transferred 6 months ago. "It doesn't show as a standard mortgage," Marianne observed. "It is reported as a private note. That is an alarming gray area. Lily, it means this debt has been sold or moved. It suggests the original lender wanted out, or your father refinanced the bad debt with even worse debt." I stared at the screen. The date on the closed account was 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I whispered. "That was when my dad had his heart attack." Marianne froze. "Tell me about that. He was in the hospital for a week," I said, the memory surfacing through the fog of shock. "When he came home, he was frantic about getting his affairs in order. He said he hadn't updated his life insurance beneficiaries. He asked me to sign some papers to make sure Mom and I were protected if anything happened to him." "Did you read the papers?" Marianne asked. I felt the flush of shame creep up my neck. He was my dad. "Marianne, he was sitting at the kitchen table, pale and shaking, telling me he wanted to make sure I was safe. I signed where he pointed." Marianne sighed. It was a sound of professional resignation. "That is the oldest trick in the book. Lily, fear and family. The two things that make smart women sign stupid pieces of paper." She wrote something down on her pad and ripped the page off, handing it to me. "You need a full title report, not the free one from the county website. You need the full chain of title. And you need to see the actual document with your signature on it. Until we see that, we are guessing." I stood up, taking the paper. "What happens if I find out I really did sign it?" I asked. "If I signed away my future because I didn't read the fine print?" Marianne looked at me, her expression softening just a fraction. "Then we fight to prove you were under duress," she said. "But Lily? Be prepared. If you did not sign it, or if you signed something different and the page was swapped, then you are not fighting a bank. You are fighting your father, and the law does not have a mechanism to fix broken hearts. I met Tessa at a diner 2 hours later. I felt like I was moving through water. The world outside seemed sharp and loud. While I was muffled and slow, Tessa had her laptop open before I even sat down. "I ordered the full title report like you asked," she said, pushing a cup of coffee toward me. "I expedited it. It cost $50. You owe me." "Thank you," I said, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "It came through 10 minutes ago," she said. Her voice was grim. "You need to look at this." She turned the laptop toward me. The document was dense, filled with legal jargon that made my eyes swim, but Tessa had highlighted the relevant sections in yellow. Second position, deed of trust. Principal amount, $600,000. Borrowers, Raymond Martinez, Denise Martinez, guarantor, Lily Martinez. And there, in the fine print of the collateral description, was a phrase that made no sense to me. Cross-collateralization clause. This note is secured by the subject property and all assets held by LM Marketing Solutions, LLC. I frowned. LM Marketing Solutions? I said, "I don't have an LLC. I've always worked as a W-2 employee." Tessa clicked to another tab. I looked it up. She said, "That LLC was formed 4 years ago. The registered agent is Raymond Martinez. The mailing address is a P.O. box in a strip mall 3 towns over." I felt a cold prickle of sweat on my back. He made a company using my initials. I realized. "It gets worse," Tessa said. "Look at the lender. It's not just Obsidian. Obsidian is the servicer. The original note holder listed on the assignment is Harbor Ridge Capital Circle." "Harbor Ridge?" I repeated. "That sounds like a gated community." "It's an investment group," Tessa said. "I did a quick search. It looks like a private lending club. Doctors, dentists, retired guys who pool their money to loan it out at high rates. My father borrowed money from a loan shark club." I said, staring at the screen. "Not sharks," Tessa corrected. "Worse, amateurs. Amateurs panic. Lily, if they think they're losing money, they don't follow banking regulations. They just come for the house." I closed my eyes. The image of the kitchen table 4 years ago burned in my mind. The smell of disinfectant. My father's trembling hand holding a pen. "Just sign here. Honey, it's just insurance." I opened my eyes. "I need to talk to my mother." I said, "I knew my father played poker on Tuesday nights at the VFW hall. It was one of the few rituals he never missed, even when he was claiming to be broke. That left a 2-hour window where my mother would be alone, probably doing the laundry or staring at the television. I parked my car 2 streets away and walked. I didn't want to risk him seeing my car if he came home early. The neighborhood was quiet. The house looked dark except for the blue glow of the TV in the den. I let myself in with my key. The lock still worked. The door frame I had photographed yesterday had been hastily patched with wood putty, a crude scar on the white paint. "Mom?" I called out softly. She was in the kitchen, not the den. She was standing at the sink, washing dishes by hand, even though the dishwasher was empty. When she saw me, she dropped a plate. It didn't break, just clattered loudly into the soapy water. "Lily," she breathed, "you shouldn't be here. If he comes back—" "He's at poker," I said. "We have an hour." I walked over to the table where we used to eat family dinners. "Sit down." "Mom." She wiped her hands on a dish towel, her movements jerky and nervous. She looked 10 years older than she had 2 days ago. Her shoulders were hunched, as if she were waiting for a blow. "I can't give you any money." "Lily," she said, her voice thin. "He checked the accounts. He's watching everything. I don't want money." I said, "I want the truth." I pulled the printout of the title report from my bag and laid it on the table. "I know about the $600,000. Mom, I know about the LLC he opened in my name. I know about Harbor Ridge." Denise flinched at the name. She pulled a chair out and sat down heavily, as if her legs had given out. "You weren't supposed to know," she whispered. "Why is my name on a $600,000 loan?" I asked, keeping my voice level. It was to save the family, she said, tears welling up in her eyes instantly. It's always the same defense, the shield of good intentions. Save us from what? From the ruin, she said. When the hardware store went under, you thought he sold it. Lily. But he didn't sell it. He lost it. There was so much debt. Vendors, suppliers, back taxes. I stared at her. My father had told everyone he had sold the business for a tidy profit to retire. He lied? He didn't want you to worry, Denise said, pleading for me to understand. He wanted you to be proud of him, so he borrowed money to cover the losses. He thought he could invest his way out of it. He started day trading. Then he got into these real estate deals. With a loan club? I asked. They were his friends. At first, she said, people he knew from the club. They trusted him. But then the market turned, and he couldn't pay the interest. They threatened to sue. They threatened to take the house, so he refinanced, I said, and he used me to do it. He needed a guarantor, Denise said, looking at her hands. His credit was shot. They said they needed someone with a clean history and future earning potential. He said it was just on paper. He said he would pay it off before you ever knew. And the insurance papers I signed 4 years ago? I asked. That wasn't insurance, was it? She shook her head, tears dripping onto the table. He told me it was the only way. Lily, he said if we didn't do it, we'd be on the street. I felt a cold numbness spreading through my chest. They had served me up like collateral damage to protect a lie. There's something else, isn't there? I asked. The report mentions a cross-collateralization with a settlement. Who is Cal Whitaker? My mother went white. The color drained from her face so completely I thought she might faint. How do you know that name? She whispered. It's in the chain of title. Mom. Part of the debt paid off a lien from Cal Whitaker. Who is he? Denise looked at the kitchen window, checking for headlights in the driveway. She leaned in, her voice barely audible. Cal was your father's partner in the first development deal, the one that went bad. So he lost money? No, Denise said. It wasn't just money. Raymond. He did things with the books to make the project look more profitable than it was. Cal found out. He was going to go to the district attorney. He was going to charge your father with fraud. I sat back, the breath knocked out of me. He was going to go to prison, Denise said, her voice trembling. Think about that. Lily, your father in prison, the shame, the neighbors. We would have been pariahs. Cal agreed to settle, but he wanted $200,000 in cash, immediately, and he wanted a non-disclosure agreement. That's why the debt is so high. It wasn't just the business, it was the silence. I looked at the woman who had raised me. I saw the fear that had defined her life. She had spent 30 years managing the ego of a man who was criminal in his incompetence. And my signature? I asked. The one on the deed of trust. I remember signing one document, but the lawyer says there are others. Did he forge my name? Mom? Denise closed her eyes. He practiced. She whispered. He sat in the study for nights, with your old high school yearbooks, tracing your signature. He said it was legal because he had your power of attorney from the insurance papers. He said he was doing it for you, so you wouldn't have the burden of knowing. I stood up. I couldn't breathe in that kitchen anymore. The air felt thick with lies. He didn't do it for me, I said. He did it so he wouldn't have to look me in the eye and tell me he's a failure. Lily, please, she begged. Reaching for my hand, I pulled away. Don't do anything crazy. If you expose this, Cal Whitaker's agreement is void if the money is clawed back. Your father could still go to jail. Let him. I wanted to say, but I didn't, because looking at my mother, broken and terrified, I realized the trap was perfect. If I saved myself, I destroyed them. I have to go, I said. I walked out the back door, leaving her weeping at the table. The next morning, I went to the county recorder's office. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed the physical proof. The clerk was a bored young man who chewed gum while he navigated the microfilm archives. I paid the copy fee and waited. When he handed me the document, The paper was still warm from the machine. Deed of trust. Instrument number 2021-45992. I flipped to the last page. There it was. Lily Martinez. I stared at it. It was a good forgery. The slant was right. The loop on the Y was almost perfect, but the pressure was wrong. My signature is fast. Light. This signature was heavy. Deliberate. You could see where the pen had paused, where the ink had pooled slightly at the curves. It was drawn, not written. It was the most intimate violation I had ever experienced. My father hadn't just stolen my money. He had stolen my identity. He had worn my name like a mask to hide his own sins. I took the copy and walked out to my car. I called Marianne. I have it. I said, "It's a forgery." My mother confirmed it. He practiced my signature. There was a long silence on the line. "Okay," Marianne said. Her voice was grave. "Now you have a choice. Lily, we can file an affidavit of forgery. We can file a police report. If we do that, we can likely invalidate the guarantee. We can save your credit. We might even be able to stop the foreclosure on the grounds of fraud. But," I asked, "but once you file a police report alleging forgery against your father, the district attorney takes over. It is out of your hands. He will be charged with identity theft, wire fraud, and bank fraud. Given the amount, he is looking at mandatory prison time." I looked at the courthouse across the street. I thought about Cal Whitaker. I thought about my mother sitting alone in that house. "And the lender?" I asked. "Obsidian will move fast." Marianne warned, "If they smell a legal battle that voids their security, they will accelerate the sale. They might try to liquidate the house before the court creates an injunction. They will scorch the earth." "Lily." I hung up. I wasn't ready to send my father to prison. Not yet. I needed to see if there was another way. I dialed the number on the intent to accelerate notice. "Obsidian Asset Management." A smooth voice answered. "This is Evan Slade." "Mr. Slade," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "My name is Lily Martinez. I'm calling about the property on Elm Street." "Ah, Miss Martinez," Evan Slade said. His tone shifted instantly. It became warm, polite, and terrifyingly sharp. "We've been hoping to hear from you. Your father has been difficult to pin down. I want to know what it will take to stop the sale." I said, "Well, that's simple," Evan said. "We need the arrears. $58,000, certified funds, by Friday. And if we can't pay that, then we proceed to the trustee sale next Tuesday," he said cheerfully. "Look, Lily. Can I call you Lily? We don't want to take the house. We just want our investors to be made whole. But the contract is clear, and since you are a guarantor, I'm sure you understand that a deficiency judgment would follow you personally. We would garnish wages, levy bank accounts. It's messy." He paused. "We really need everyone on the paperwork to cooperate. If you and your father can come to a consensus, maybe we can restructure. But if you fight us, if you try to delay, we will liquidate the asset, and we will come for the balance from your personal assets." I realized then that he knew. He knew the loan was toxic. He knew the family dynamic was broken. He was banking on it. He was betting that I would pay to avoid the destruction of my family. "I don't have $58,000. I said, "That's unfortunate," Evan said. "Then I suggest you help your father pack. You have until Tuesday." The line went dead. I sat in my car for a long time. The clock on the dashboard blinked. 11:45 a.m. I had 72 hours until the eviction deadline my father had set. I had 5 days until the trustee sale. I realized I couldn't save the house. The hole was too deep. $600,000 of debt on a house worth barely more than that, with a predatory lender and a secret settlement holding it all together. My father was panic-stricken, lashing out because he knew the walls were closing in. If I stayed, I would be the target of his rage. If I fought him legally, I would be the cause of his imprisonment. I needed to step off the game board. I drove back to the house. My father's truck was gone. He was probably out trying to hustle up money, or perhaps just driving around to avoid the reality waiting for him at home. I went to the basement. I didn't cry. I moved with mechanical efficiency. I packed my clothes. I packed my books. I packed the few pieces of art I had collected. I didn't take the furniture. I didn't take the bed. I called a moving van. They arrived in an hour. I directed them to take everything to a storage unit on the south side of town. When the room was empty, it looked small, just a concrete box with a broken door frame. I left my key on the kitchen counter. I didn't write a note. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't be used against me later. I got in my car and drove to Tessa's apartment. When she opened the door, she saw my face and stepped aside. "I'm done," I said. "You're safe," she said. I walked into her guest room and put my bag on the floor. I wasn't happy. I wasn't relieved. I felt a heavy, dull grief. I had lost my home. I had lost the version of my parents I thought existed. But as I lay down on Tessa's guest bed that night, listening to the city sounds outside, I realized I had kept the one thing my father had tried to take. I had the truth. And for now, quiet self-preservation was the only victory I could afford. I returned to the house on Wednesday morning, not to reconcile, but to retrieve the last of my life. The 72-hour deadline my father had screamed at me was ticking down, and I wanted to be gone before the timer hit 0. The house felt wrong the moment I stepped inside. It wasn't just the silence, though the silence was heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. It was the visual wrongness of the hallway. The walls, usually cluttered with a shrine of family history, were bare. The gallery of framed photographs, my high school graduation, Nate's baseball championships, the overly posed studio portraits from the 90s, was gone. The hooks remained, jutting out of the beige paint like little accusations, but the glass and the smiles were missing. I walked into the living room. The heavy oak filing cabinet that had sat in the corner for 20 years was gone. The carpet where it had stood was a brighter, cleaner shade of cream than the rest of the room. "Mom?" I called out. Denise appeared from the dining room. She was holding a dust rag, wiping the surface of the table with frantic, circular motions. She didn't look up. "I'm just cleaning," she said quickly. Her voice was too high, too bright. "Getting ready for, well, just cleaning." "Where are the pictures?" I asked. "Where's the filing cabinet?" "I moved them," she said, scrubbing a spot that didn't exist. "Your father thought it was too cluttered. We wanted to open up the space." "Feng shui? Feng shui?" I repeated. "Mom, Dad thinks yoga is a communist plot. He didn't move a 300-pound cabinet for energy flow." "Where are the papers?" She finally stopped scrubbing and looked at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed and darting. "They are in storage. Lily, just safekeeping." "Safekeeping from whom?" I asked. "From me?" She didn't answer. She just turned back to the table. I realized then that they weren't just hiding assets from a potential bankruptcy trustee. They were sanitizing the crime scene. They were removing the paper trails that showed when money came in and where it went. I walked past her, down to the basement. I packed the last box of books in silence. As I taped it shut, I felt a surge of cold determination. If they were hiding the physical evidence, I had to find the digital footprints they couldn't scrub away. I spent the afternoon at the public library. I didn't want to use the Wi-Fi at Tessa's, paranoid that my father might somehow track my search history. It was irrational, but fear makes you irrational. I sat at a scratched terminal and pulled up the Superior Court Index. I typed in the name I had seen on the title report, Cal Whitaker. The screen populated with a list of traffic violations and a divorce filing from 2005, but there, near the bottom, was a civil case, Whitaker v. Martinez, case number CV 2018-9902. I clicked on it. Status, sealed. Disposition, dismissed with prejudice, sealed. Civil cases were rarely sealed unless the settlement involved sensitive trade secrets or minors, or unless someone paid a lot of money to keep it quiet. I looked at the filing date. It was late 2018. I opened a second window and pulled up the archived local news from that year. I searched for my father's hardware business. In early 2018, there were articles about local businesses struggling. Then, in December of 2018, 1 month after the Whitaker case was dismissed, there was a puff piece in the Community Gazette. Martinez Hardware expands inventory. Owner cites strong fourth quarter. The timeline clicked into place like a lock engaging. My father hadn't had a miraculous fourth quarter. He had bought Cal Whitaker's silence in November, likely using the first tranche of high-interest debt from the loan club, and then used the rest of the cash to stage a recovery that wasn't real. He had been robbing Peter to pay Paul, and when Peter ran out of money, he had robbed his own daughter. I printed the case summary page. It wasn't proof of the debt, but it was proof of the secret. My phone buzzed. It was an email from Marianne Cho. Subject: Loan documents received. I opened the attachment immediately. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I could feel it in my throat. The PDF was 50 pages long. Marianne had added comments in the margins. Lily, the body of the email read, "These were provided by the trustee this morning. I want you to look at page 42. Call me when you are ready." I scrolled down to page 42. It was a document titled Personal Guarantee of Payment and Performance. It was dated August 14th, 2020, and there was my signature. It looked official. It had the standard boilerplate language about waiving rights and accepting full liability. It had a witness signature, scrawled and illegible, and it had a notary stamp. I dialed Marianne's office. She picked up on the first ring. "I'm looking at it." I said, "Tell me what you see." Marianne said, "It's my name." I said, "It's my address." But I wasn't in town on August 14th. That was the week I was at the corporate retreat in Chicago. I have the flight receipts. I have the hotel folio. "Good," Marianne said. "That is excellent evidence. But look closer at the document itself. Look at the formatting." I zoomed in. The font on the first page is Times New Roman. Marianne said, "But the signature page? That is Arial." I blinked. She was right. It was subtle, but distinct. They swapped the pages. I whispered, "It is a Frankenstein document." Marianne said, "They likely took a signature page from another contract, maybe the insurance paperwork you mentioned, and stapled it to this guarantee. It is sloppy." Lily, "But it is only sloppy if someone looks. Most people just see the signature and fold. What do? We file a demand for the original wet ink documents," she said, "but we also need to attack the notarization. A guarantee usually requires a notary to witness the signing. Do you recognize the notary's name? Samuel J. Perkins?" "No." I said, "I'm running a check on his commission now." Marianne said, "In the meantime, don't tell your family you have this. Let them think you are still guessing. If they know we have the document, they might try to destroy the original." I hung up and drove to the storage unit to meet the movers. I was sweating, the AC in my car struggling against the midday heat. As I pulled into the parking lot of the storage facility, I saw a familiar silver BMW parked near the entrance. Nate, my younger brother, was leaning against the hood of his car, looking at his phone. He was wearing a suit, his tie loosened, the uniform of the successful pharmaceutical sales rep he was. Nate was 29, charming, and the undisputed golden child of the Martinez family. He had escaped the house early, married well, and generally treated our parents' drama with a benevolent, distant amusement. He looked up as I parked. He didn't look amused today. I got out of the car. "Mom told me you were moving stuff here," he said. He didn't say hello. "I didn't know you were speaking to me." I said, unlocking the gate keypad. "Dad told me I was dead to him. I figured that extended to you." Nate sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "Lily, come on. Dad is Dad. He's dramatic. He's stressed. But you're acting crazy." I stopped walking and turned to face him. "Crazy?" I asked. "Is that the word they're using?" "Mom is a wreck," Nate said. "She says you're accusing Dad of stealing. She says you're threatening to sue them. Jesus, Lily, they're old. They're struggling. I know Dad is bad with money, okay? I know he borrows from Peter to pay Paul. But you're treating him like a criminal. He is a criminal." "Nate, he's your father," Nate shouted. His voice echoed off the metal doors of the storage units. "He paid for your college. He put a roof over your head. So maybe he moved some money around and used your name to secure a bridge loan. He was going to pay it back. He always figures it out. He forged my signature. Nate, I said, my voice low and hard. On a $600,000 lien. Nate stopped. He blinked, his mouth opening slightly. What? He said. I opened my bag and pulled out the copy of the title report and the intent to accelerate notice. I shoved them into his chest. Read it. Nate took the papers. He read the numbers. I watched his face. I watched the arrogance of the golden child dissolve into the confusion of a boy who suddenly realizes the ground isn't solid. 600,000? He whispered. Plus interest, I said, and fees, and a cross-collateral clause that ties it to a shell company. He looked up at me. His eyes were wide, but he told me it was a small line of credit. He asked me for $5,000 last month to cover the mortgage. He said it was just a cash flow thing until the settlement came in. There is no settlement coming in. Nate, I said, the settlement was money he paid out to Cal Whitaker to keep him quiet about fraud. Nate leaned back against the storage unit door, sliding down until he was squatting on the pavement. He put his head in his hands. He called me yesterday, Nate said, his voice muffled. He asked if he could put the BMW in my name. He said it was for insurance rates. Did you do it? I asked. No, Nate said. I told him I'd think about it. He looked up at me, and I saw the crack in the facade. It wasn't a sob. It was a stillness, a terrifying clarity. Lily, he said, does this mean the house was never safe? The house hasn't been safe for years, I said, and neither were we. Nate stood up slowly. He handed me back the papers. He looked sick. I can't fix this, he said. I know. I can't take sides. Lily, if I go against him, he'll destroy me. You know how he is. I know. I said again, I didn't hate him for it. I just felt a profound pity. He was still trapped in the web I had just cut myself out of. I'm not asking you to take sides. Nate, I'm just showing you the map so you don't step on the landmine. He nodded, stiffly. Then he got in his car and drove away without looking back. I sat in my car at the storage unit, staring at the documents again. Marianne's comment about the notary kept nagging at me. Samuel J. Perkins? I pulled up the state's notary public database on my phone. It was a searchable index. I typed in the name, Samuel J. Perkins. Commission number, 889201. Status, inactive. I clicked for details. Commission expiration date, May 12th, 2019. I looked at the document in my lap. Date of signature, August 14th, 2020. The notary's commission had expired 15 months before he supposedly stamped this document. The stamp on the paper was invalid. The document wasn't just a forgery. It was a clumsy, impossible forgery. The notary, if he had even been there, had used an expired stamp, or more likely, my father had found an old stamp in a drawer somewhere, maybe from a friend or a former business associate, and used it himself, not realizing the dates wouldn't line up. It was such a small detail, a date, a stamp, but in the eyes of the law, it was everything. A deed of trust requires a valid notarization to be recorded. Without it, the lien was technically defective. I didn't need to prove my father held the pen. I just needed to prove the stamp was a lie. I felt a strange sensation. It wasn't triumph. It was the feeling of a surgeon locating the tumor. I needed to confirm one last thing. I called my mother. She answered on the first ring, which meant she was sitting by the phone, waiting. Mom, I said, I'm not fighting. I just have a question. Lily, please come home. She wept. He's sorry. He's so sorry. The notary. Mom. Samuel Perkins. Who is he? There was a pause, a long, hesitant silence. He was a guy Dad knew from the Elks Lodge. She whispered. He used to do signings for the car lot. Is he still around? He died. Lily, 2 years ago. I closed my eyes. Of course he was dead. My father was using a dead man's stamp. Mom, I said, the document, the guarantee. Did Dad tell you why he needed it? Why he needed my name specifically? Denise's voice broke. The lender demanded it. Lily, Harbor Ridge. They said Raymond was high risk. They said the property values were soft. They wanted additional security. Raymond told them. He told them you were a silent partner in the LLC. I gripped the steering wheel. He told them I was a partner? He said it didn't matter. Denise cried. He said you would never be impacted. He had a deal pending. Lily, a land deal in Nevada. He showed me the prospectus. It was going to pay out $400,000. He said he would pay off the loan before the first payment was due. He promised me. He lied. Mom, there was no deal in Nevada. There never is. He believed it. She insisted. That counts for something, doesn't it? He didn't mean to hurt you. He ran out of time. He didn't run out of time, I said softly. He ran out of people to use. I hung up. That evening, I was at Tessa's apartment, sitting on the floor of the guest room surrounded by my files. Tessa was working a night shift, so I was alone. The doorbell rang at 8 o'clock. I froze. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. It was my father. He wasn't the raging bull who had kicked down my door. He was wearing a clean polo shirt and slacks. He was holding a cardboard carrier with 2 Starbucks cups. He looked tired. His shoulders slumped, his face unshaven but soft. He looked like the dad who used to teach me how to ride a bike. I debated not opening it, but I knew he wouldn't leave. I opened the door, leaving the security chain on. Dad, I said. Lily pad, he said, using the childhood nickname that usually made me melt. Can I come in? I brought you a caramel macchiato, your favorite. I unhooked the chain and opened the door. I didn't take the coffee. Tessa isn't here, I said. I know, he said, stepping inside. He looked around the small apartment with a critical eye, then masked it with a smile. I just wanted to talk to my girl. He walked to the kitchen counter and set the coffee down. He turned to me, his hands held up in surrender. I'm sorry, Lily, about the door, about the yelling. I was out of my mind with stress. You know how I get, the blood pressure, the sugar. It wasn't me. It was you. Dad, I said, leaning against the wall, keeping my distance. He sighed, running a hand over his face. Okay, it was me. And I'm ashamed. I want to make it right. How? I asked. He reached into his back pocket. He pulled out a folded document. I talked to Evan Slade today, he said. Good guy? Reasonable. I told him everything. I told him about the misunderstanding. I told him we want to fix this as a family. He unfolded the paper and smoothed it out on the counter. He agreed to a reset. Lily, a total clean slate. He's willing to capitalize the arrears, add the $58,000 to the back of the loan, and lower the interest rate. We keep the house. No foreclosure, no eviction. We just go back to normal. I looked at the paper. It was titled Loan Modification and Forbearance Agreement. And I need to sign it? I asked. He nodded, uncapping a pen he had brought with him, just right here, as the guarantor. It just confirms that you're on board with the new plan. It stops the sale. Lily, immediately. We can put this whole nightmare behind us tonight. I walked over and looked at the document. Marianne's warning rang in my ears like a siren. Signing anything now could ratify the obligation. If I signed this, I wasn't just stopping the sale. I was admitting the debt was valid. I was retroactively approving the forgery. I would be accepting liability for the full $600,000. I looked at my father. He was watching me with an expression of intense, desperate hope. He was smiling, but his eyes were hard little marbles. You forged my signature on the original, didn't you? I asked quietly. His smile didn't falter, but the corner of his eye twitched. Lily, don't get hung up on technicalities. We were in a rush. I was handling business. You used a dead man's notary stamp. Dad. Samuel Perkins died 2 years before the date on that document. The silence that filled the kitchen was absolute. The hum of the refrigerator sounded like a jet engine. My father's face changed. The charm evaporated. The exhaustion vanished. What was left was something cold and reptilian. He straightened up, looming over me. "So you've been digging," he said. His voice was no longer the soft, apologetic tone. It was the voice of the man who had kicked down my door. I had to. I said, "You think you're smart?" He sneered. "You think finding a clerical error makes you smart? You're ungrateful. That's what you are. I'm not signing this. Dad." He slammed his hand down on the counter. The coffee cups jumped. "You have to sign it. If you don't sign it, they take the house on Tuesday. Do you understand that? They take the house. Then they take the house," I said, my voice steady, though my knees were shaking, "because I am not going to let you chain me to a debt I didn't create. I am not going to let you drown me to keep yourself afloat for another 6 months. You're killing your mother," he hissed. "You're killing this family. The family is already dead. Dad, you killed it when you sold my name to a loan shark." He looked at me with pure hatred. For a second, I thought he might hit me. His hand twitched, but he saw something in my face. Maybe the ghost of the daughter who used to worship him, now replaced by a witness who could destroy him. He snatched the paper off the counter. "You'll regret this," he spat. "You'll be sorry when you're standing on the street watching us get thrown out." He turned and stormed out. He didn't close the door. I walked over and shut it. I locked the deadbolt. I locked the chain. Then I picked up my phone and called Marianne. "Do it." I said. "Do what?" she asked. "File the complaint. File the motion. He just tried to get me to sign a ratification. He knows we know." "Okay," Marianne said. "I will file the complaint with the Secretary of State's notary unit tonight, and I will have the emergency motion to stay the sale ready for court tomorrow morning." "Lily?" "Yes?" "Lock your doors." "They're locked." I said. I hung up. I looked at the caramel macchiato on the counter. I picked it up and poured it down the sink. It smelled like sugar and burnt milk. I sat down at the table and opened my laptop. I started typing my affidavit. I, Lily Martinez, being first duly sworn, depose and states as follows. I wasn't the responsible daughter anymore. I was the plaintiff. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. A windowless box that smelled of floor wax and stale adrenaline. The hearing for the temporary restraining order took less than 15 minutes. The judge, a tired-looking woman with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, reviewed Marianne's emergency motion and the attached affidavit regarding the expired notary commission. She granted the stay. But she didn't bang a gavel or deliver a speech about justice. She simply looked at the calendar and gave us 10 days. 10 days to produce hard evidence that the underlying debt was fraudulent, or the trustee sale would resume. It was a victory, but it felt like a stay of execution rather than a pardon. When I got back to Tessa's apartment, the adrenaline crash hit me like a physical blow. I spent the next 48 hours in a state of vibrating exhaustion. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father's face contorted in rage, or worse, my mother's tear-streaked face begging me to just let it happen. My appetite vanished. The smell of Tessa cooking toast in the morning made my stomach turn. I lay on the guest bed, staring at the ceiling fan, feeling a crushing weight on my chest. It was guilt. It was illogical, toxic, manufactured guilt. But it was there. My family had spent 33 years training me to be the shock absorber. I was the one who smoothed things over. I was the one who fixed the budget. I was the one who absorbed the anxiety so they didn't have to. And now, by refusing to absorb this, I was breaking the machine. The voice in my head, my mother's voice, kept whispering, "You are making them homeless. You are sending your father to prison. You are the villain." I had to remind myself, out loud, in the empty room. I did not forge the signature. I did not spend the money. I am not the villain. On Friday night, my phone buzzed with a text from Nate. "They are at the bingo fundraiser at the church. They will be gone for 3 hours. The code to the garage keypad is 4921. I stared at the screen. Nate was playing both sides. He wouldn't stand up to them to their faces, but he couldn't stomach the reality of what they were doing to me. It was a coward's compromise, but I took it. I drove to the house in the dark, parking 2 streets over just in case. The neighborhood was quiet. The house looked dark and abandoned, though I knew the electricity was still on, for now. I punched the code into the garage keypad. The door rumbled up, the sound seeming deafening in the stillness. I slipped inside and hit the button to close it immediately. The garage smelled of gasoline and sawdust. My father's smell. It was cluttered with the debris of his failed hobbies, a half-restored motorcycle, boxes of unsold hardware inventory, and there, tucked behind a stack of winter tires, was the gray fireproof lockbox. Nate had left the key taped to the bottom of the box. I didn't open it there. I didn't want to be caught standing over the evidence if they came home early. I hauled the heavy box to my car, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I drove back to Tessa's before I let myself breathe. We opened it on the kitchen table. It was stuffed with papers, old tax returns, deeds, insurance policies. But at the bottom, beneath a layer of rubber-banded receipts, was a black composition notebook. It was a ledger. My father was old-fashioned. He didn't trust computers, ironically enough, for fear of being hacked, so he kept his real books by hand. I opened the notebook. The pages were covered in his cramped, spiky handwriting. It wasn't a standard accounting ledger. It was a list of names, dates, and amounts. Jan 2018, HRCC, 50,000, Mar 2018, Dr. Evans, 75,000, June 2018, T. Reynolds, 40,000. Next to each entry were notes. Interest due, 12%, renewal date, Dex 1. I ran my finger down the page. The totals were staggering. He wasn't just borrowing from a bank. He was running a private investment scheme. Look at this, I said, pointing to a recurring acronym, HRCC, Harbor Ridge Capital Circle. Tessa peered at the page. That's the lender on the deed of trust, she said. The original note holder. I kept reading. The entries for Harbor Ridge weren't marked as loans. They were marked as investment capital. Guaranteed return. He was taking money from these people, neighbors, friends, members of his social club, and telling them he was investing it in real estate development. He was promising them 12% returns. But the outgoing column didn't show real estate purchases. It showed payments to credit cards, payments to the country club, payments to Cal Whitaker. He was using new money to pay old debts. I whispered, "It's a Ponzi scheme. A small, suburban Ponzi scheme." Then I found the page that made my blood run cold. It was dated 4 years ago. Collateral, pledge, 42 Elm Street. Note, use laying M. Guarantee for security. He had written it down. He had planned it. Use Lan M. Guarantee. He knew 4 years ago that he would need my name to keep the game going because his own credit was ruined. I flipped to the back of the notebook. There were loose papers tucked into the pocket. They were emails, printed out hard copies. My mother's email address was at the top. The recipient was Evan, Slade Obsidian AM, com. The date was 3 weeks ago, before the door-kicking incident. Before I knew anything, Evan, my mother wrote, "We are working on Lily. She is asking questions about the mail, but I have intercepted most of it. We need a little more time to get her cooperative. She is high-strung, but she usually does what is best for the family if we frame it correctly. Please hold off on the notice." Evan's reply was brief and professional. "Mrs. Martinez, we need a signature on the forbearance agreement by the 1st. If she isn't on board, we have to accelerate. You mentioned she is currently living in the unit? That gives you leverage. Use it." I dropped the paper as if it were burning my skin. "She framed me," I said, my voice shaking. She wasn't protecting me from his anger. She was managing me. She told him I was a tool they could use. Tessa picked up the email and read it. Her face hardened. She usually does what is best for the family. Tessa read aloud, "That isn't love, Lily. That is animal husbandry. They were fattening you up for the slaughter." The guilt I had been feeling, the crushing, debilitating weight of it, evaporated. In its place, a cold, hard diamond of clarity formed in my chest. They didn't just steal my money, they stole my agency. They discussed how to manipulate me like I was a stubborn employee. I closed the ledger. I need a lawyer who isn't afraid to burn the whole village down. I said, Marianne Cho was excellent, but she admitted this was getting beyond simple foreclosure defense. She referred me to an investigator she used for complex fraud cases. His name was Jonah Pierce. We met in a booth at a 24-hour diner that served coffee thick enough to pave a road. Jonah was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite and left out in the rain. He wore a cheap suit and had eyes that missed nothing. He didn't look at the emotional betrayal. He looked at the mechanics. I gave him the copy of the ledger and the title report. He spent 10 minutes in silence, flipping through pages, making small notes in a notebook. Finally, he looked up. "Your father is a small-time grifter," Jonah said. His voice was gravelly. "He's robbing Peter to pay Paul, and he's bad at it. That's why he got caught. But this?" He tapped the name Obsidian Asset Management and Evan Slade. "This is different. This is professional." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I ran a background on the LLC that holds the lien," Jonah said. "It lists a corporate address in a business park. But when you pull the actual suite number, it's a mailbox rental store in a strip mall next to a dry cleaner. A shell company." I said, "Classic." Jonah agreed. "But here's the kicker. I ran Evan Slade. He isn't just a loan officer. He used to be an attorney in Florida. He was disbarred 5 years ago for robo-signing foreclosure documents." "Disbarred?" I asked. Jonah nodded. "He moved west, reinvented himself as a distressed asset manager. He targets people like your father, people who are desperate, over-leveraged, and have assets they can't protect. He gives them hard money loans with terms they can't possibly meet. Knowing he'll take the property, he knew my father couldn't pay." I said, "He counted on it." Jonah said, "And when he saw your name on the title report as a potential guarantor, he saw fresh meat. He knew if he could hook you in, he'd have a second stream of income to garnish." Jonah leaned in. "Your father is the mark, Lily, but you are the collateral damage. And these guys? They do this for a living. They know exactly how to pressure a family. They know the psychology. They know your father will throw you under the bus to save his own skin, and they are handing him the keys to the bus." He slid a photo across the table. It was a grainy shot of Evan Slade walking out of the strip mall office. He looked younger than I expected, sharp-featured, wearing a suit that cost more than my car. "If we prove the forgery," Jonah said, "Slade loses his security interest. The lien vanishes. He becomes an unsecured creditor. He gets in line with everyone else. He will fight you with everything he has because you are threatening his payday. Let him fight." I said, "I'm not signing anything." The backlash started 2 days later. My father realized I wasn't coming back. He realized the clean slate offer had failed. So he did what he always did when cornered. He attacked my reputation. It started with a text from my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, Lily. "Your mother called me in tears. I can't believe you are trying to evict them. After everything they did for you, you need to get help. They say you're having a breakdown." Then a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. "Hey, heard you're going through some stuff. Mental health is serious. Don't take it out on your folks." My father was calling everyone. The narrative was consistent and devastating. Lily is unstable. Lily is off her meds. I was never on meds. Lily is vindictive and trying to steal the house because she's angry about losing her job. He was using my vulnerability, the layoff, the fact that I was single and living in their basement, to paint a picture of a woman unhinged. I sat in Tessa's living room, watching the messages roll in. Each one was a little stab wound. These were people I had spent Christmases with, people who had known me since I was a baby, and they believed him, because the lie was easier to believe than the truth. The lie preserved the family order. The truth, that Raymond Martinez was a thief and Denise was his accomplice, was too ugly to look at. "Don't reply," Tessa warned. She was pacing the room, furious. "They want you to explode. If you scream at them, you prove his point." "I know," I said. I typed out a single message. I attached the screenshot of the forgery from the county recorder and the screenshot of the email where my mother discussed managing me. I sent it to Aunt Linda. "I am not unstable. I uncovered a $600,000 fraudulent loan taken out in my name without my consent. Attached is the forgery, and Mom's email admitting to the manipulation. I will not be discussing this further." Please do not contact me unless you want to see the police report. I sent it. Then I blocked her number. I did the same for the cousin. I didn't argue. I didn't defend my mental health. I just dropped the facts like stones into a well and walked away. The silence that followed was deafening. No one apologized. No one asked for more details. They just stopped texting. They didn't want to know. They chose the comfortable silence of the lie over the messy noise of the truth. The court-ordered mediation was scheduled for Tuesday morning, 3 days before the rescheduled trustee sale. It was held in a conference room at a neutral law firm downtown. The room was glass-walled, sterile, and cold. My father and mother were there. They sat on one side of the long mahogany table. My father wouldn't look at me. He stared at a spot on the wall, his jaw working. My mother looked at me with tragic, wet eyes. Wearing a cardigan I had bought her for her birthday, she looked small and frail. A performance of victimhood that I now recognized as a weapon. Evan Slade was there. He sat at the head of the table. He was exactly as Jonah had described, slick, polished, with a shark-like smile that didn't reach his eyes. Marianne sat next to me. She opened her briefcase with a snap that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Let's begin," the mediator said. He was a retired judge who looked like he wanted to be on a golf course. Evan Slade spoke first. "We are here to find a solution," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "My client, Obsidian Asset Management, has no desire to foreclose. We want to keep Mr. and Mrs. Martinez in their home. We understand there has been some confusion regarding the paperwork." He slid a document across the table toward me. "This is a global settlement agreement," Evan said. "It restructures the debt. We will lower the interest rate to 6%. We will capitalize the arrears. The monthly payment becomes manageable. All we need is for Lily to sign as a co-borrower. This clears up the title issue and secures the asset. It's a win-win." Marianne didn't touch the paper. She just looked at Evan. "Mr. Slade," she said, her voice icy, "you are asking my client to assume liability for a $600,000 debt she did not incur. You are asking her to ratify a forgery." "We dispute the term forgery," Evan said, his smile tightening. "Mr. Martinez had power of attorney." "A power of attorney limited to insurance matters," Marianne countered. "And the notary stamp? Was the notary also a ghost?" Evan waved a hand dismissively. "Procedural hiccups. We can litigate that for 2 years. Ms. Cho. And in the meantime, the house sits in limbo. The legal fees pile up, and the family is destroyed. Or, Lily signs this paper, and everyone goes home happy today." My father spoke then. He turned to me. "Lily, please," he said. His voice was hoarse. "Just sign it. I'll pay the monthly. I swear. I have a deal coming through in March. Harbor Ridge is backing a new project. I'll refinance you off the title in 6 months." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had taught me to tie my shoes. "You have a deal with Harbor Ridge?" I asked quietly. "Yes," he said, nodding eagerly. "Big development. Very secure." I looked at the ledger in my mind. The entries of him paying off one investor with another's money. "You're lying." "Dad," I said, "Harbor Ridge isn't backing a project." "You owe them money. You're trying to use this loan to pay them back so they don't sue you." His face went white. "That's private business," he snapped. "It's my business if you want my signature." I said, I looked at Evan Slade. "I know who you are." I said, "I know about Florida. I know about the robo-signing. And I know you know that notary stamp is invalid." Evan's smile vanished. His eyes went flat and dead. "Be very careful. Miss Martinez," he said softly. "Accusations are expensive. So is foreclosure." I said, I turned to the mediator. "I will not sign as a co-borrower. I will not sign a modification. I will not pay 1 cent of this debt." My mother let out a sob. "Lily, you can't. I can, Mom, and I am." Evan Slade leaned forward. "Then we proceed to sale on Friday. And once we liquidate the house, if there is a deficiency, and there will be, we will pursue you for the balance. We will garnish your wages for the next 20 years. We will ruin your credit so thoroughly you won't be able to rent a scooter, let alone an apartment. He was threatening me with the one thing he thought I cared about: my financial stability, my future. Marianne put a hand on my arm, signaling me to stop, but I was done. No, I said, you won't. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick envelope. Marianne, give it to them. Marianne smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. She took the envelope and slid it across the table to Evan. What is this? Evan asked. That, Marianne said, is a subpoena for your internal communication logs regarding the Martinez account, and a subpoena for the notary journal of Samuel Perkins, which we know doesn't exist, and a copy of the complaint we filed this morning with the State Attorney General's fraud unit. Evan went still. We aren't just defending the foreclosure, Mr. Slade, Marianne said. We are cross-complaining for racketeering, fraud, and elder abuse. We are alleging that you knowingly colluded with Mr. Martinez to defraud his daughter. My father looked between us, confused. What does that mean? He asked. It means, I said, looking him in the eye, that I'm not just stopping the sale. I'm coming for the truth. Evan stood up abruptly. He didn't look at my father. He looked at me with pure venom. This meeting is over. He gathered his papers and walked out. My father sat there, stunned. He looked at the empty chair where his savior had been sitting. You just lost the house, he whispered to me. No, Dad, I said, standing up. You lost it 4 years ago. I'm just turning on the lights so you can see the wreckage. Come on. Marianne? We walked out. In the elevator. My legs finally gave out. I had to lean against the wall to keep from sliding to the floor. You did good, Marianne said. She didn't touch me, but her voice was warm. You held the line. They're going to hate me forever. I said, yes, she said. They probably will. But you are free. I went back to Tessa's. I didn't celebrate. I crawled into bed at 2 p.m. and pulled the blankets over my head. I felt sick. I felt like I had just cut off my own arm to get out of a trap. But for the first time in 10 days, the guilt was gone. The text messages from my family had stopped. The silence on my phone was absolute. I lay there in the quiet, listening to the traffic outside. I was alone. I was disowned. I was facing a massive legal battle against a predator who knew all the tricks, but I owned my name again, and that was worth more than the house. The subpoena for the notary log came back on a Tuesday morning, landing on Marianne's desk with the heavy thud of absolute proof. I was sitting across from her, my hands wrapped around a paper cup of lukewarm tea, watching her face as she scanned the photocopied pages. Marianne didn't smile. She didn't cheer. She just looked up at me with the grim satisfaction of a mechanic who has finally located the severed brake line. It is empty, she said. She turned the book toward me. It was a copy of the official journal of Samuel J. Perkins. The entries were handwritten in blue ink, documenting signatures witnessed for car title transfers and minor contracts. Look at the dates. Marianne commanded. I ran my finger down the column. The last entry was dated May 10th, 2019. The rest of the page was blank. The following pages were blank. Your alleged signature is dated August 14th, 2020. Marianne said. Not only was Mr. Perkins deceased at that time, but his logbook was sitting in a box in his widow's garage, collecting dust. There is no entry for you. There is no entry for your father. There is no entry for Obsidian Asset Management. She closed the folder. This is the smoking gun. Lily. In a court of law, a deed of trust is void if the notarization is fraudulent. Without a valid notary acknowledgement, the instrument cannot be recorded. Legally, that lien does not exist. I stared at the blank lines on the page. It should have felt like a victory. It should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like a diagnosis. It was the confirmation that the cancer was terminal. My father hadn't just made a mistake. He had fabricated a reality and forced the world to live in it. We move for summary judgment? I asked. Marianne shook her head. Evan Slade knows we have this. He knows his security interest is about to evaporate. He is not going to wait for a judge to rule on the validity of the stamp. He is going to try to outrun us. How? He will accelerate the foreclosure using a non-judicial path, she said. He will try to sell the house at auction before the hearing date. Once the house is sold to a third party, a bona fide purchaser, it becomes much harder to unwind. We need to file an emergency fraud affidavit immediately to block the sale. She pushed a notepad toward me. But first, I need you to confirm something. The signature. You said it looked practiced. Yes, I said. Who saw him practice it? I went cold. I knew the answer. There was only one other person in that house who sat at the kitchen table while my father worked. I called Denise from the car. I didn't ask if she was free. I told her I was coming to pick her up. I can't leave, she whispered. He's in a mood. I'm parked around the corner. Mom, if you don't come out, I'm coming to the door with the police report I just drafted. She came out 3 minutes later. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her, wrapped in a trench coat that seemed to swallow her frame. She got into the passenger seat of my car and didn't look at me. She stared straight ahead at the dashboard. We drove to a park 3 miles away. I parked facing the lake. Ducks were fighting over a piece of bread near the water's edge. He used a dead man's stamp. Mom, I said. Denise flinched, pulling her coat tighter. I know, she said. Her voice was a dry rustle. He found it in an old box of files from the car lot. He said it was a sign, Providence. And the signature? I asked. She closed her eyes. I watched him. She admitted. The confession hung in the air, suspended between us. He sat at the desk in the study. She continued, her voice gaining a desperate, rambling cadence. He had your high school yearbook, and that birthday card you sent us last year. He had a pad of scrap paper. He did it over and over again. Loop the L, cross the T. He kept saying, it has to be perfect, or they won't accept the help. And you just watched? I asked, gripping the steering wheel. I told myself it was practice, she said, turning to me, her eyes wet and pleading. I told myself he was just seeing what it looked like. I told myself, he isn't actually going to do it. He's just stress testing the idea. And then he did it. And once it was done, he said, see, it's fixed. Now we have 6 months to find the money, just to buy time. I repeated the phrase she had used before. It's always just to buy time. Lily, do you think I wanted this? Do you think I wanted to live like this? She reached into her purse, a cheap knockoff handbag she treated like a treasure, and pulled out a small, worn envelope. You think I'm stupid, she said, her voice hardening with a sudden, surprising bitterness. You think I'm just his doormat. I don't think you're stupid. Mom, I think you're an accomplice. She laughed. A sharp, jagged sound. I'm a survivor. Lily, look at this. She tossed the envelope onto the center console. I opened it. Inside was a policy document for a whole life insurance plan. The face value was $50,000. The insured was Denise Martinez. The beneficiary was Lily Martinez. I looked at the date. It was taken out 15 years ago. I've been paying the premiums for 15 years, she said. $20 here, $30 there, skimming it from the grocery money, hiding it in the laundry budget. Why? I asked. Because I knew, she said. I always knew he would crash us eventually. I knew one day he would dig a hole so deep we couldn't climb out. And I wanted to make sure that when he finally killed us financially, there would be something left for you. Just a little something. So you wouldn't be left with zero. I stared at the policy. It wasn't an act of malice. It was an act of profound, terrifying resignation. She had lived for 15 years waiting for the bomb to go off, and her only strategy had been to secretly sew a parachute for me while she stayed in the burning plane. You prepared for the crash, I said slowly, but you never tried to grab the wheel. I couldn't, she whispered, the fight draining out of her. You can't steer a man like Raymond. You can only hold on. She looked at me, her face crumbling. He's going to lose the house, isn't he? Yes, I said. And he might go to jail? If he keeps lying. Yes, she nodded, wiping her face with her hand. Okay, she said. Okay, just don't tell him about the insurance. Please, if he knows I have $50,000 in cash value, he'll make me cash it out to pay Evan Slade. I looked at her. She was trapping me in another secret, but looking at her terror, I couldn't refuse. I won't tell him, I said. I dropped her back at the corner. As I drove away, my phone buzzed. It was Nate. Can we talk? He asked. I just left the house. I met him at a coffee shop halfway between the storage unit and Tessa's apartment. Nate looked wrecked. His tie was gone, his top button undone, his usually perfect hair windblown. He looked like he had been in a fight. I asked him. Nate said without preamble. I sat him down and I asked him point blank. I said, Dad, did you forge Lily's name? And? He didn't deny it. Nate said, he didn't even look ashamed. He looked confused. He looked at me and said, I put a roof over her head for 18 years. I paid for her braces. I paid for her prom dress. I created her credit score. I felt a chill slide down my spine. He thinks he owns me. I said, it's worse, Nate said. He thinks it's a transaction. He thinks that because he provided for you as a child, he has a perpetual lien on your adulthood. He said, she owes me this. It's just a signature. Why is she making such a big deal about a signature when I gave her a life? He doesn't see it as a crime, I realized. He sees it as a collection. Exactly, Nate said. When you resist, he doesn't see it as you setting a boundary. He experiences it as a betrayal. In his mind, you are breaking the contract. You are the one who is stealing from him by not letting him use your name. Nate took a long sip of his black coffee. His hand was shaking. I told him he was wrong, Nate said quietly. I told him he was delusional. What did he do? He told me to get out. He said if I was going to side with the enemy, I wasn't his son. Nate looked up at me, his eyes red. He disowned me. Lily, over a question. I reached across the table and took his hand. Welcome to the club, I said. We sat there for a long time, two orphans with living parents, listening to the espresso machine hiss. The next day, I found the ledger entry that had been gnawing at me. Harbor Ridge Capital Circle. I did a search online and found a flyer for their monthly meeting. It was held in the back room of a family restaurant on the edge of town. The website described it as an exclusive investment community for local prosperity. I put on a baseball cap and glasses. I drove to the restaurant and sat in the back booth, nursing a soda, watching the people file into the private room. I expected slick businessmen. I expected sharks in suits like Evan Slade. I was wrong. The people walking into that room were elderly, men in windbreakers and orthopedic shoes, women carrying oversized purses and wearing sensible knits. They looked like the crowd at a church bingo night. I saw a man who used to own the bakery downtown. I saw my third-grade teacher, Mrs. Gable. They were laughing, shaking hands, drinking coffee from styrofoam cups. I slipped into the room just as the meeting started, standing in the shadows near the kitchen door. The president of the club, a man named Howard, who looked about 70, stood up. All right, everyone, settle down, Howard said. We have some updates on the portfolio. First off, regarding the Martinez allocation. The room went quiet. We've had some assurances from Raymond that the liquidity issue is temporary, Howard said, adjusting his glasses. He's finalizing a restructure this week. He promised that the interest payments will resume by the 1st of the month. I know some of you rely on that check for your pharmacy copays, so I want to be transparent. Raymond is a good man. He's one of us. We have to have faith. Mrs. Gable raised her hand. Her voice trembled. Howard, I can't wait another month. That money was my husband's life insurance. If Raymond defaults, he won't default. Martha. Howard soothed. He pledged his own home as collateral. He's putting everything on the line for us. That's the kind of man he is. I felt like I was going to be sick. They didn't know. They didn't know he had already leveraged the house to the hilt with obsidian. They didn't know the collateral they were counting on was already underwater, drowning in secret debt. My father hadn't just stolen from me. He was stealing from them. He was using their trust, their shared history, their desperation for yield in a low-interest world, to fund his delusions. If I stopped him, if I blew up the house of cards, these people would lose everything. But if I didn't stop him, they would lose everything anyway, just slower. I slipped out of the room before anyone saw me. I sat in my car and cried. Not for myself, but for Mrs. Gable. The emotional weight of the fight shifted in that parking lot. It wasn't just about saving my credit score anymore. It was about stopping a predator who was eating the neighborhood alive. I went straight to Jonah Pierce's office. We need to nail Evan Slade. I said, my father is the face of this, but Slade is the architect. Jonah nodded. He handed me a stack of papers. I've been digging into the email server of that shell company. Jonah said, don't ask me how I got these. He pointed to a highlighted email chain dated 2 days before the door-kicking incident. From Evan Slade. To Raymond Martinez. Subject, occupancy removal strategy. Raymond. The email read, the forbearance is off the table unless we have total control of the asset. The daughter living in the basement is a liability. You need to create a hostile environment to encourage voluntary vacancy. If you can get her to leave of her own accord, we avoid the eviction moratoriums. Go in hard. Make it untenable. Disruption of sleep is effective. Demand rent arrears. Shock and awe. I stared at the words. Disruption of sleep is effective. Shock and awe. The 2 a.m. confrontation. The kicking down of the door. I had thought it was a drunken outburst of a stressed man. It wasn't. It was a tactical maneuver drafted by a consultant and executed by my father. He hadn't just lost his temper. He had followed a script. He terrorized me because he was told to. I whispered, it makes him look less like a father and more like a henchman. Jonah said grimly, but this email? This proves collusion. It proves Obsidian wasn't just a lender. They were advising him on how to illegally evict a tenant, you, to clear the title for their takeover. This is racketeering. We file. I said, we file everything. Marianne filed the emergency fraud affidavit the next morning. She included the notary log discrepancy, the expired commission evidence, and the email chain regarding the occupancy removal strategy. The court moved fast. The judge, clearly alarmed by the allegations of systemic fraud, scheduled an evidentiary hearing for Monday morning. He issued a stern warning attached to the docket. All parties are ordered to appear in person. Any attempt to transfer, encumber, or liquidate the subject property prior to this hearing will be considered contempt of court and subject to immediate sanctions. It was a hard stop. The sale was blocked, but Evan Slade wasn't done. That afternoon, he filed a procedural motion arguing that the underlying debt remains valid regardless of the technical defects in the security instrument, and requested a court-appointed receiver to take control of the property immediately. He was trying to seize the house before the fraud could be proven. Marianne called me. It's going to come down to your testimony. Lily, she said, you have to stand up in open court and say, that is not my signature, and my father is a liar. Can you do that? I looked at the empty guest room at Tessa's. Yes, I said. On Sunday night, the evening before the hearing, I drove to the house. I didn't call first. I didn't ask permission. I parked in the driveway. The lights were on in the kitchen. I walked up the path. Past the rose bushes my mother tended with religious devotion. I knocked. My father opened the door. He looked terrible. His skin was gray, his eyes sunken. He was wearing the same clothes he had worn at the mediation. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw hope flare in his eyes. You came back, he said. I walked past him into the kitchen. My mother was sitting at the table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. She looked up, terrified. I'm not coming back. Dad, I said. The hope in his eyes died, replaced by a dull confusion. Then why are you here? To tell you what is going to happen tomorrow. I said. I stood in the center of the kitchen, the room where I had done my homework, where we had eaten Christmas dinners. Tomorrow morning, I said, keeping my voice steady, I am going to stand in front of a judge. I am going to present the notary log that proves Samuel Perkins was dead when you used his stamp. I am going to present the emails where Evan Slade told you to terrorize me, and I am going to testify that you forged my signature." Raymond stared at me. The silence stretched, thin and tight as a wire. "You wouldn't," he whispered. "You wouldn't send your own father to jail." "I'm not sending you to jail. Dad, you sent yourself when you stole from me. You sent yourself when you stole from Mrs. Gable and the people at Harbor Ridge." He flinched at the names. "I know about them too." I said, "I know about the Ponzi scheme." Raymond's face crumbled. He didn't explode. He didn't scream. He started to cry. It was a shocking, ugly sound. Great heaving sobs that shook his heavy frame. "I was going to fix it," he wailed. "I just needed one big hit. The Nevada deal. It was going to pay everyone back. I did it for us. I did it so you could have this house." He reached out to grab my arm. "Lily, please, if you testify, it's over. They'll take everything. The house, the car, my reputation. I'll be an old man in a cell. Please, just say you signed it. Just say you forgot. I'll make it up to you. I swear to God. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." I looked at him, a weeping, desperate man who still believed that his good intentions justified his crimes. I stepped back, out of his reach. "You can't make it up to me. Dad, you can't unkick the door. You can't unforge the signature." He stopped crying abruptly. The sorrow vanished, replaced by a flash of the old, terrifying anger. "You ungrateful bitch," he hissed. "After everything I gave you," I looked at Denise. She was weeping silently, her face buried in her hands. "Mom?" I said. She didn't look up. She couldn't. She was strapped into the crashing plane, and she had decided to go down with it. I turned and walked to the door. "See you in court," I said. I drove back to Tessa's in a daze. The finality of it was suffocating. I had severed the limb. It was done. When I got to Tessa's apartment, there was a box sitting on the small concrete porch. It was my childhood keepsake box. The wooden chest with the brass latch that I had kept under my bed for 20 years. I froze. They must have dropped it off while I was at the house. A countermove. I carried it inside and set it on the coffee table. My hands shook as I opened the latch. Inside were the artifacts of a life I no longer recognized. My kindergarten diploma, a ribbon from a spelling bee, a photo of me and my father fishing, both of us smiling, him pointing at a trout I had caught. And on top of the pile was a note. It was written on Denise's stationery, in her neat, looping cursive. "Lily, I packed this for you. I don't think we will see you for a long time. I'm sorry. I don't know how to fix what I helped break. Please remember that we loved you, even if we loved the lie more. Mom." I read the note twice. "Even if we loved the lie more." That was the epitaph of our family. They loved the image of success more than the reality of their daughter. They loved the house more than the home. I took the photo of me and my dad fishing. I looked at his smiling face. I remembered that day. I remembered how safe I felt standing next to him in the water. I tore the photo in half. I put the pieces back in the box and closed the lid. I didn't cry. I didn't have any tears left. I just felt a cold, hard resolve settling over me like armor. I went to the closet and picked out my suit for court. I chose the navy blue one. Sharp, professional, unsentimental. The daughter was gone. The witness was ready. The courtroom was a study in beige neutrality, a vacuum where lives were dismantled in 15-minute increments. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Marianne Cho. My hands clasped so tightly that my knuckles had turned the color of old bone. Judge Althea Reynolds presided. She was a woman who looked like she had heard every lie ever told in the state of California and was unimpressed by all of them. Evan Slade stood at the defense table. He looked relaxed, almost bored. He was wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car, and he checked his watch as if he had a tea time to catch. My father sat next to him, hunched and small, staring at the grain of the wood table. He didn't look at me. "Your Honor," Marianne began, her voice crisp and echoing in the high-ceilinged room. We are here to challenge the validity of the deed of trust recorded against the property at 42 Elm Street. We are moving to void the instrument based on fraud, specifically the forgery of the guarantor's signature and the fraudulent notarization of the document. Evans stood up, smoothing his lapel. Your Honor, this is a delay tactic. The plaintiff is a resentful adult child who is angry about being asked to contribute to family finances. Mr. Martinez had power of attorney. The debt is valid. The default is clear. We are simply trying to exercise our contractual right to liquidate the collateral. Marianne didn't argue. She simply walked to the clerk's desk and placed a heavy, leather-bound book on the counter. Exhibit A, Marianne said. The official notary journal of Samuel J. Perkins. She turned to the judge. Mr. Perkins's commission expired on May 12, 2019. Mr. Perkins himself passed away in October of that same year. We have attached his death certificate as Exhibit B. The judge looked at the documents. She adjusted her glasses. She looked at the date on the death certificate, then at the date on the deed of trust. August 14, 2020. Marianne continued. The signature of the notary on the contested document is dated 10 months after his death. The stamp used was expired. The entry in the logbook for this transaction does not exist because the man who supposedly witnessed it was in his grave. The courtroom went silent. The air conditioner hummed. Marianne pulled out a second stack of papers. Exhibit C, she said, an email chain between Mr. Slade and Mr. Martinez, dated 3 weeks ago. In this exchange, Mr. Slade advises Mr. Martinez to execute an occupancy removal strategy to force the plaintiff out of her home. He suggests disruption of sleep and creating a hostile environment. She handed the papers to the bailiff, who passed them to the judge. This is not a family dispute, Your Honor, Marianne said. This is a conspiracy to defraud a guarantor and illegally evict a tenant to clear a title for foreclosure. Judge Reynolds read the emails. Her expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. She looked up at Evan Slade. Mr. Slade, the judge said. Her voice was quiet and dangerous. Do you have an explanation for why your company is accepting documents notarized by the deceased? Evan Slade didn't flinch. He was a professional. He knew when a hand was lost. Your Honor, he said smoothly, we rely on third-party notaries. If Mr. Martinez provided a document that was improperly executed, that is a matter between him and the notary. We accepted the paperwork in good faith. The judge looked at my father. Raymond shrank into his collar. It is the ruling of this court, the judge said, that the personal guarantee allegedly signed by Lily Martinez is void ab initio. It is a fraudulent instrument. The lien against Lily Martinez's assets is vacated. I let out a breath I had been holding for 2 weeks. Marianne squeezed my arm. However, the judge continued, the court cannot erase the underlying debt owed by Raymond and Denise Martinez. Mr. Martinez signed the promissory note. He received the funds. The fact that he attempted to secure it with a fraudulent guarantee does not absolve him of the principal obligation. The deed of trust remains a valid lien against his interest in the property. She looked at Evan. The temporary restraining order is lifted as to the primary borrowers. The trustee sale may proceed regarding the interest of Raymond and Denise Martinez. She banged her gavel. Case closed. It happened that fast. I had won. I was free. My credit was safe. My name was cleared. But the house was gone. Dawn on the day of the sale didn't look dramatic. There were no storm clouds. There was no ominous soundtrack. It was just a Tuesday. The sky was a pale, indifferent blue. The sale was scheduled for 10 in the morning on the courthouse steps, but in reality, it happened on a server somewhere in a data center. I was at Tessa's apartment, refreshing the county auction website. At 9:59, the status of the property was listed as active. At 10:01, the status changed. Sold to third-party bidder. Winning bid. $610,000. That was it. 30 years of mortgage payments, of painting walls, of planting gardens, of holidays and arguments in life, gone in a refresh of a browser window. An investor entity had bought it. Likely a flipper who would paint it gray, put in subway tile, and sell it for $800,000 next month. I closed the laptop. I felt a strange, hollow sensation in my chest. It wasn't triumph. It was the feeling of walking away from a car crash with only bruises while looking back at the burning wreck. I drove to the house. I had to see them. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to see the reality of it to believe it was over. The house looked exactly the same as it had yesterday. The lawn was green. The windows were intact. But the energy had shifted. It no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like a carcass. I walked in through the unlocked front door. My mother was sitting at the kitchen table. The room was bathed in sunlight. She was staring at her hands, which were folded on the placemat as if she were praying. My father was standing by the window, looking out at the street. He didn't turn around when I entered. "It's done," I said. Denise looked up. Her eyes were dry and rimmed with red. "They sold it?" she whispered. "Yes," I said. "An investment group. You'll probably get a notice to vacate in 3 days." She nodded slowly. She didn't cry. She looked like someone who had been treading water for years and finally just stopped kicking. "I thought I was protecting everyone," she said. Her voice was thin, like paper. "I thought if I just kept the secrets, if I just moved the money around, I could keep us safe. I thought I was the glue." "Lily, you weren't the glue." "Mom," I said, feeling a surge of grief and anger that made my throat tight. "You were the camouflage. You hid the cracks until the whole foundation rotted. I didn't want you to hate him," she said. "I don't hate him," I said, "and I don't hate you. I mourn you. I mourn the parents I thought I had." The back door opened, and Nate walked in. He looked frantic. He was wearing gym clothes, sweating, his eyes darting around the room. "I saw the listing update," he said, breathless. "It's gone?" "It's gone," I said. Nate ran a hand through his hair. He looked at Raymond's back, then at Denise, then at me. "Okay," he said. "Okay. We have to figure this out. We need a plan. Mom and Dad can't be on the street." He turned to me, his eyes pleading. "Lily, I found a rental condo in the complex near my gym. It's available immediately. But they need last, and a security deposit. And, well, my credit is tied up with the car and the wedding loans. I need a cosigner." I looked at my brother, the golden child, the one who had never been asked to carry the weight. He was panicking, and his instinct was to reach for the nearest steady object, me, just for a year. Nate said, "Just until Dad gets his feet under him. You have the good credit now. The judge cleared you. If you sign the lease, we can move them in tonight." I looked at Denise. She was watching me with a spark of hope. I looked at Raymond. He had turned from the window. He was watching me too, waiting for the rescue, waiting for the responsible daughter to do what she was trained to do. "No," I said. The word hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Nate blinked. "What?" I said no. "Nate, I will not co-sign a lease. I will not put my name on any piece of paper that involves this family. But they're going to be homeless," Nate stammered. "Then we help them find a shelter," I said, "or a week-to-week motel. Or you sign the lease." "I can't," Nate cried. "I don't have the ratios." "Then they have to face that." I said, "I will help you pack boxes. I will help you research low-income housing assistance. I will help you call the movers. But I will not be the financial host anymore. No more rescues that become traps." Raymond made a sound. It was a scoff, a harsh expulsion of air. "Cold," he said. "Ice cold. That's my daughter." I looked at him. "I'm not cold. Dad, I'm just fireproof now. You burned away everything else." My phone rang in my pocket. It buzzed against my hip like a warning. I pulled it out. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Hello?" I answered. "Miss Martinez?" a voice asked. A woman's voice. Professional and stern. "Yes, this is Sarah Jenkins. I am the legal counsel for the Harbor Ridge Capital Circle Oversight Committee." I froze. The room seemed to tilt. "Yes?" I said. "We received an anonymous tip regarding irregularities in the investment funds managed by your father, Raymond Martinez." Sarah said, We have initiated a forensic audit. It appears that several $100,000 of member capital is unaccounted for. I looked at my father. He was watching me, his eyes narrowing. We are preparing to file a formal report with the Securities and Exchange Commission and the district attorney. Sarah continued, We understand you may have information regarding the disposition of these funds. We would like to request a formal interview. I closed my eyes. The anonymous tip I had submitted, just a single online form to their ethics board, had triggered an avalanche. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just losing a house. This was prison. This was felony embezzlement. This was my father's name being dragged through the mud in the local papers. His friends losing their retirement. The complete and total destruction of the reputation he had killed to protect. Miss Martinez? Sarah asked. I opened my eyes. I looked at the man who had forged my name. I looked at the woman who had watched him do it. I will cooperate. I said into the phone, I have documents I can provide. I hung up. Who was that? Raymond asked. His voice was sharp. That was Harbor Ridge. I said. Raymond's face went the color of ash. He grabbed the back of the chair to steady himself. What did they want? He rasped. They're auditing the fund. Dad, they know the money is gone. They're going to the district attorney. Raymond made a noise that sounded like a wounded animal. He slumped into the chair opposite Denise. You? He whispered. He looked at me with a mixture of awe and horror. You called them? I didn't deny it. You did this, he said. His voice rose, shaking with rage. You destroyed me. You took the house. You took my business. You took my life. You did this. I looked at him. For 33 years, I had been afraid of his anger. I had been afraid of his disappointment. I had tiptoed around his ego like it was a landmine. But as I stood there in the sunlight of the kitchen that was no longer ours, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. He was just a small, sad man who had built a castle out of lies and was shocked that it fell down. No, Dad, I said quietly, I didn't do this. I pointed to the table where he had sat and practiced my signature. You did. You borrowed the money. You spent it. You forged the name. You lied to the investors. I just turned on the lights. He stared at me. And for the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. He wasn't looking at his daughter anymore. He was looking at a force of nature he could no longer control. He was looking at the truth, and it terrified him. He put his head in his hands and went silent. I turned to Nate. I'm going to go outside. I said, I'll wait for the movers. I walked out the front door and sat on the brick steps. The morning sun was climbing higher, burning off the mist. Down the street, I saw a large white truck rumbling toward us. The movers. I watched it approach. I thought about the boxes inside the house. I thought about the keepsake box sitting on Tessa's coffee table with the torn photograph inside. I had won. I had saved my financial future. I had escaped the debt. I had stood up to the bully and the manipulator. But as I sat there, I didn't feel like a winner. I felt the heavy, crushing weight of the wreckage. My parents were about to be homeless. My father was facing prison time. My mother was facing a retirement of poverty and shame. My brother was traumatized and drifting. I couldn't fix it. That was the hardest realization of all. I couldn't put the family back together. The family I wanted, the one where we loved each other enough to tell the truth, had never existed. It was a fiction I had written in my head to survive. I watched the truck pull up to the curb. The air brakes hissed. 2 men in blue uniforms jumped out, looking at a clipboard. Are you the homeowner? One of them asked, looking at me. I looked at the house one last time. I looked at the rose bushes. I looked at the splintered frame of the front door that my father had patched with wood putty, a scar that would never quite heal. No, I said, I'm just a witness. I stood up. I picked up my purse. I checked to make sure I had my file folder, the one with the notary log, the emails, and the court ruling, my armor. I walked down the driveway, past the movers, past the mailbox where the foreclosure notice had first appeared. I didn't know where I was going next. I didn't know where I would live next month. I didn't know if I would have to testify against my father in a criminal trial. I didn't know if my mother would ever speak to me again. The uncertainty was vast and terrifying, but as I reached the sidewalk, I took a deep breath. The air smelled of cut grass and exhaust fumes. It smelled real. I wasn't the responsible daughter. I wasn't the victim. I wasn't the guarantor. I was Lily Martinez, and for the first time in 33 years, the name belonged only to me. I turned the corner and walked away, while the sound of cardboard boxes being taped shut echoed in the street behind me. Thank you so much for listening to My Father Kicked Down My Door. At 2 a.m., by dawn, he lost the house, over a $600K secret I uncovered. This story was a journey into the dark side of family loyalty and the high price of truth. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Please drop your city or country in the comments below. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories so you never miss an episode. And I want to hear your thoughts. Did Lily do the right thing by reporting the fraud, even though it destroyed her father? Or should she have kept the secret? Let me know your opinion in the comments. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your signatures safe.